No one noticed when she slipped in. Most people didn't even remember her name. She drifted through those plush hallways like a breeze, light, almost absent, yet carried a whole world's weight in her chest. Every step held a story too big for words, a silence louder than any resume tacked to a wall. She wasn't just a cleaner. She was someone who'd learned early on to speak to the world, without raising her voice. Life trained her to live in the background, to watch the wings while others owned the stage. And still, she showed up every day, same hour, same spot, like a root that keeps growing even under concrete. Inside, an invisible seed stirred. You couldn't see it, but it burned like sunrise running late. An old dream, the kind you bury because you're scared you'll look foolish. But dreams don't die, they just change outfits. Hers wore a white lab coat, scribbled notebooks, and Dutch phrases memorized in the dark. While the world slept, she studied. While she wiped tables, she practiced sentences. While she took orders, she rehearsed the tone, all in secret. Sometimes what we want most is what we fear confessing. She held that wish the way you handle glass, aware one slip could shatter everything. One day, though, the mirror cracked. In the shards, she finally saw herself. No longer the tired woman, no longer the invisible uniform, but a raw, shining version stripped of everyone else's expectations. Recognizing yourself in your own ruins is the first step before raising a new floor. The ground may split, but that's where transformation sets its foundation. And when destiny senses you're ready, it whispers. Sometimes in an empty room, sometimes in a phone call. That day, it came in the language she both dreaded and adored. A Dutch voice cut through the hush. She answered naturally, steady, light, with the force of someone who no longer doubts her worth. Across the room, a billionaire stopped typing, lifted his gaze, and, for the first time, saw her. No applause, no remarks. Yet from that moment on, everything shifted. Some debts never arrive by mail, but weigh more than any bill. They're the invoices of existence, charging us for what we didn't dare be, out of fear, out of time, out of sheer survival. She carried those invoices in her chest like rocks in her pockets, still smiling so no one worried. She was good with numbers, but couldn't calculate how much of her life she'd paid off in installments. Each morning began with silence, weak coffee, and a mental spreadsheet that never listed her own soul. Living, for her, meant paying interest on imposed choices. At 4 a.m., while the world was still dreaming, she woke. Not regular insomnia, creative restlessness rumbling. There's still time. Eyes red, feet cold. She opened her notebook. Studying Dutch at that hour wasn't just discipline. It was a pact with a kid who once dreamed of becoming a doctor, a teacher, someone who'd care, teach, and touch the world differently. Every conjugated verb was a promise paid in dignity. Yet anxiety crept back during the day. Random thoughts stacked like bricks without mortar. She built castles of possibility on cracked out. Will they ever hear me? Is it ridiculous to want more? Still, she kept going, cleaned, organized, smiled. On the outside, everything under control. Inside, a building site of dreams, fears, hopes, all piled together. In that invisible architecture, she started building what came next, brick by brick, word by word, quietly, calmly, with a quiet faith that some debts, once paid, free you more than any inheritance. The first time she uttered a full Dutch sentence out loud, it was to herself, in the staff bathroom mirror, between a mop and a bucket. She whispered those words like testing a key in an ancient lock. It worked. The bolt slid inside her. It wasn't just a foreign language. It echoed something way deeper, as if each sound unpacked forgotten drawers of her own being. She wasn't just learning vocabulary. She was remembering herself. In that enormous building, a single corridor stretched, long, cold, echoing. To her, it was sacred. Daily she crossed paths with everyone. Receptionists, managers, investors. No one paid attention. Until the moment she passed another cleaner, and a billionaire stood at the end. 3 lives, 3 worlds, 1 hallway. She noticed. The silence said more than the contracts. For a few seconds, the floor outspoke the high heels. She looked at her coworker. They exchanged a small smile, tiny gesture loaded with code. The corridor became a cathedral. In that thin air, something sparked. Someone greeted her in Dutch. First time, no subtitles. She answered instinctively, fearless, as if her soul, tired of waiting, jumped ahead of her mind. That good morning was a spark, fire torching every stale version of herself. Sometimes it's that simple. A greeting, a recognized sound, and everything changes. In that split second, she wasn't a woman trying to fit in. She was a woman coming home to herself. In that company, resumes were read like lab reports, cold, timed data. Hers never reached the right desk. It wasn't on letterhead or attached to an email with references. Her resume lived in spotless baseboards, stain-free bathrooms, days when nobody waited because everything was already done. Silent victories. Trophy-less wins. Whole stories scribbled on the margins of board meeting minutes. No one read them until someone did. A new manager, eyes still untrained to ignore, heard her accent but noted its precision. Quietly, he asked where she was from. She hesitated, considered inventing something neutral, then breathed deep and told the truth. The interrupted college, diplomas packed away, certificates folded between clothes and homesickness as they crossed oceans. Something ripped open, not pain, liberation, showing that paper, yellowed by time and shame, felt like throwing open a window after years locked shut. He looked stunned, less at the diploma, more at the act. Courage is exposing yourself without any applause guarantee. Then came his question, gentle but heavy with recognition. Why sweep floors when you were born to move continents? She didn't answer. She just smiled, small, restrained, saying, I'm remembering who I am. Change often starts that way. Not with a grand decision, but with a gaze piercing the surface and the nerve not to look away. This wasn't a contract you signed fast. It made her hands shake, not from doubt, but from knowing every line realigns life's axis. She stared at the paper like a mirror. In the reflection, she no longer saw the silent cleaner. She saw the woman who burned through dawns, memorized foreign verbs, rebuilt self-worth among leftover shame. The choice wasn't simple. Signing meant picking desire over fear, and she'd chosen fear far too long. The paycheck was symbolic. Sure, it would handle bills, better groceries, new clothes for her kids. But that wasn't why her breath hitched. What quaked inside was an invisible currency, purpose. For the first time, her minutes would be worth more than the clock said. She'd be paid not only for what she did, but for what she carried. Priceless. When she picked up the new keys, her hands still smelled of cleaning solution. She noticed and didn't wash them first. Something sacred. Remember, you don't start at the top. You start whole. The Amsterdam keys jingled quietly but boomed inside her. They opened outer doors. But first, they unlocked what had been bolted shut by fear of not belonging. It was the sound of someone telling herself, I walk in now. All of me. Jordan wasn't just another Amsterdam neighborhood. It was a water mirror where she finally saw a rebuilding woman emerging. Narrow streets, silent canals, old windows. Each spoke to her in symbols. The reflection in the water no longer showed a worn surface, but an identity that stayed steady even stripped of certainties. She walked slowly, honoring every step of a journey that was never obvious. Each corner held a fragment of who she'd been and who she could still become. Even her wardrobe changed, not for vanity, but inner necessity. Fabric wasn't the same. She dressed with care, each piece a bridge between what she had endured and what she was ready to live. Nothing flashy, everything subtle, a new code that whispered, I see myself. Seeing yourself is the first step to being seen. Still, some days blurred, homesick for origins, guilty for changing, scared to slip. But she'd learned to reroute without losing her core. Her identity's GPS no longer sought outside approval. It steered by the inner north you only find after getting lost. Quietly, she moved on not as someone fleeing, but as someone finally choosing her own road. On a narrow Santa Teresa balcony where winds carried the neighbors' voices and time slowed, bread was broken before the wine. Not mere gesture, ritual, sharing bread first meant. Before the toast, honor the hurt. They sat face to face, not as lovers in heat, but as two souls recognizing each other in the shards. She talked little. He listened hard. In the space between sentences, in pauses heavy with half-told stories, in crumbs falling onto the table, lived an ancient intimacy that almost lacked a name. The kiss wasn't impulse or theater. It was manifesto, a silent treaty of reciprocity. Nobody needed to prove a thing. No abusive clauses. No future promises. Just two life-scarred bodies choosing each other not despite the scars, but because of them. A discreet, almost shy seal, yet dense. She knew then real love doesn't demand performance. It demands the guts to stay. The hourglass flipped. Time ran on new terms, measured not in meetings or instant messages, but in permitted silences and looks that needed no footnotes. He understood her weight. She senses abysses. Together, they built bridges, not to escape, but to cross lightly what once seemed impassable. The building was old, graffiti on concrete, memories in walls, not chosen by chance. It was her, had been much, sheltered many, now asking restoration. Leading that project was more than a job. It was a summons. As she debated plans with engineers and architects, she herself was rebuilt. Restoring each wall was really recovering buried certainties. Each choice of color, texture, window carried a symbol. Her body saying, "I'm ready to hold anew." Among the rubble lay a bundle of master keys. Every worker got one, but she made sure to hear each story before handing them out. True leadership isn't control, it's listening. The broom that knew every corner still leaned nearby, and she, despite the new title, grabbed it now and then, not for nostalgia but respect. Nothing was erased. Every stage mattered, even the silences. Then came an unexpected gift, a sapphire ring, small, delicate, offered by steady hands. Not a promise of forever, a pledge of presence, commitment without cage, a link between what beats and what stays. She accepted, not for the stone's price, but its meaning, the courage to love freely without losing herself. The real treasure wasn't the shine outside, but what had been polished within. It wasn't on a spreadsheet, timeline, or freshly organized planner. But life loves miracles that scare before they amaze. She was pregnant, with twins. For days, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So much life, all at once. The body that had learned to withstand in silence now had to learn to yield, to host, to stretch inside and out. First came fear, of failing the job, the kid she already had, her own story. Slowly, fear sculpted itself, like a rough stone under pressure revealing sparkle. It turned into care for herself, her schedule, her quiet, her sleep, nourishment for body and soul. She understood, the love you give starts with the love you keep. Nothing stronger than a woman who learns to tend to herself so she can nurture what she carries. Deadline slipped, forecast derailed, but something bigger orchestrated it all. A divine agenda bulldozed plans, yet made perfect sense. The universe seemed to say, now. And she trusted, not because she knew, but because she felt. Life was saying yes. Finally, so was she. On paper, a new last name appeared, an unlikely, beautifully unlikely combo, Almeida Marquez. Hearing it in the hotel lobby sent a shiver, not from cold, from memory, ancestry, stories in her bones. Not merely two names together. An acceptance that a tree grows best when grass honors roots. She was both tree and graft, original and new at once. The ceremony was in the hotel foyer. No luxury, no cliches, just truth. She wanted to marry where she worked, not for ease, for meaning. That space sparked her change. So celebrating love, their declared vocation, and affection can share a roof. Between marble halls and meeting tables, vows were spoken, low, honest, eyes firmer than the words. The hotel chain, once a symbol of distance and protocol, became a web of affection. Every branch, a memory. Every floor, a story. She, once invisible in so many rooms, now moved easily between the admin and the intimate. The real luxury wasn't in suites or full bookings. It was in the heart opening at each reception. Hers was home, for her kids, her love, herself. That morning, crossing the stone bridge over the main canal, She paused. No rush. The sky mirror in the water returned the same image now alive inside her, a perfect circle. From janitorial to leadership, from cleaning to commanding, from monologue to symphony. Each phase left marks, none empty scars, but living signs where she'd been and what she'd learned by staying. Now it all made sense, the pain, the waiting, the silences. Every moment she doubted herself, every night memorizing words that felt foreign, preparation, not to be applauded, to be recognized by herself. Gratitude became compass, not for winning, but for being seen, for finally taking up her own space without asking permission. Each sunrise was more than a new day. It was proof of an everyday miracle. In the distance, the phone rang. A call in Dutch. She answered, naturally, fluently, lightly. No need to impress, just being herself. Those once foreign codes flowed with the ease of someone who translated not just words, but her soul. In that instant, no audience, no stage, she smiled. Because she got it once and for all. The true dialect of destiny is courage. If this story touched a part of you that lives in silence, don't ignore it. Here, every video is a mirror, a shelter, a reunion. Stories that don't shout, but reach. Wisdom that doesn't preach, but wakes. If you look for strength in quiet, clarity in pain, purpose in the invisible, this channel is your home. Subscribe, and let the next story find you when you need it most.